Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。China's president has just returned from a 5-day official visit to Europe, his first time on the continent in nearly 5 years. While there, he visited France, Serbia and Hungary in a bid to show Europe that China is open for business and that China's goal is mutual respect, win-win cooperation, and global peace and prosperity. But the Western media didn't take too kindly to his visit, with the Financial Times labelling it unproductive and claiming China's president was there to sow divisions in Europe. Are they right, or is this just a case of sour grapes? Today we'll chat with two special guests for their takes, French national Arnaud Bertrand and Serbian Nik Stankovic. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. When President Xi Jinping landed in Paris on May 5, the Western media was clearly waiting and watching with bated breath. There he held talks with French President Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, where Xi reiterated that the China-EU relationship is complementary and mutually beneficial, and that China views its relationship with the EU from a strategic and long-term perspective. This relationship does not target any third party, nor should it be dependent on or dictated by any third party, Xi said, clearly referring to Washington interference and their Cold War mentality towards China. On May 8, President Xi was met with a warm welcome to streets decked out with Serbian and Chinese flags. At one point, he was greeted like a rock star by a crowd of about 15,000 waiting outside the Palace of Serbia in the capital Belgrade. His visit coincided with the 25th anniversary of the US bombing of China's embassy in the city, which killed 3 Chinese journalists. In an article in Serbian media, Xi said, 25 years ago today, NATO flagrantly bombed the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia, killing 3 Chinese journalists. This we should never forget. The China-Serbia friendship, forged with the blood of our compatriots, will stay in the shared memory of the Chinese and Serbian peoples. The Western media weren't happy with Xi bringing up that hideous attack on China in 1999, which I'll talk about shortly. Finally, Xi headed to Hungary on May 9 to meet with Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a man the Western media like to call disruptive. During his European visit, President Xi succeeded in letting Europe know that it's not here to play childish games with the US-led West and its Washington proxies in the region. On top of that, many agreements were reached between China and the 3 countries. 18 high-level deals were signed in France, 30 in Serbia, and a further 18 in Hungary. Plus, 300 Serbian students have even received full scholarships to come to China. But how did the Western media report it? Well, one now infamous case is that of the Financial Times, who called Xi's trip unproductive. Xi Jinping's unproductive European tour was the headline, and the byline read, China's president gave few concessions and signalled his authoritarian worldview. Off to a great start, the article continues. While the Chinese leader could have treated the trip as an opportunity for rapprochement with Europe, he chose instead to sow divisions. Much of Xi's trip has been spent embracing Chinese allies that are troublesome members of the European family. Wow, troublesome members of the European family. That is a new one. Whatever happened to democracy and freedom? Are European countries not allowed to forge their own policies and walk their own paths? They're just expected to toe the line and, like unelected oligarch Ursula von der Leyen, just bark when Washington screams and wag their tail when Washington throws a bone. And remember how Xi's visit coincided with the 20th anniversary of NATO maliciously and intentionally bombing China's embassy in Belgrade? Well, the Financial Times were annoyed at that too. Imagine being annoyed that a president remembers and recalls the hideous and tragic actions of Western aggression that led to the deaths of 3 Chinese nationals just doing their jobs. They wrote, visiting Belgrade on the 25th anniversary of NATO's bombing of the Chinese embassy gave Xi opportunity to criticize the Atlantic Alliance and voiced support for non-EU Serbia's claim to Kosovo. Boo bloody who. It's very clear to me that the Financial Times, nothing more than a stenographer for US-led Western hegemony, is suffering from a case of sour grapes. I posted on Twitter. Seriously, if the Financial Times calls Xi's trip unproductive, then I'm absolutely positive it achieved everything China wanted to achieve. Now I want to bring in French national Arnaud Bertrand, who's a well-respected geopolitical commentator. Arnaud, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. First, I want to get your overall thoughts on President Xi's visit to France. How do you think it went, and how was it received by the French public?
So I think that both China and France got what they wanted, which means it went well, I think, for both parties. Macron's big thing is strategic autonomy, which means he wants to show that, in his own words, France is not a vassal of the US and can speak, with its own voice to other countries. So that's what he showed by, inviting Xi and speaking directly to China. And China wanted kind of the same thing. They wanted to, show that there are some friendly Western countries out there which are not completely behind the US. So I think both sides got what they wanted in that regard. I think the one thing that kind of spoiled the party was the presence of Ursula von der Leyen at the first meeting in the first morning, because she has always been very hostile, at least in her rhetoric with China. And, straight after the meeting, she did a press conference, which was quite, aggressive and so on. And all in all, many French people were commenting that it conflicted with Macron's rhetoric on strategic autonomy, because he had her literally chaperoning him in the meeting. And then in her speech afterwards, she was using rhetoric like overcapacity and so on, which is American rhetoric. So it didn't really show strategic autonomy at all. Anyway, after she was just there for one meeting, and after they spent the remaining 1 day and a half, only both of them, Macron and Xi. So that was, not the main show, but it was still, I think, a negative point of the meeting. And lastly, I think there were some interesting joint statements that came out from the trip, like, for instance, one on the Israel-Palestine situation, which showed that actually France and China had quite similar views on the question, insisting on having a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, things like that. Interestingly, China agreed to try to push for Olympic truce, which is something Macron is keen on, because the Olympics happen in Paris. I don't think it will happen. I don't see it. I don't see, both the Ukraine war and the Gaza situation stopping just because it's the Olympics, but I thought it was interesting that China and France agreed on this. And then there were joint statements on things like AI, global governance, and so on. So it was, even when you look at statements, it was quite productive.
Yeah, it does sound very productive, at least from a French perspective. But Western media, as is par for the course, is claiming that President Xi's European tour achieved nothing but sowing division in the region. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I think it's quite it's the usual quite misleading way of framing things. There is this Lord of the Rings quote that I love. I guess you must like Lord of the Rings too, since you're from New Zealand, which is the reason why there are 3 rings of power is because one ring will always corrupt, 2 rings will divide, but with 3 rings there is balance. I think that's the essence of strategic autonomy for Europe. The vision is basically to have three rings of power in the world, not one ring with the US and Europe together against China, but one ring with China, one ring with the US, and one ring with Europe, which I think would be, a better situation. As a European, I don't want Europe to be vassalized to the US. And China wants this. On Europe, at least, according to what Macron is saying, they want this. They want strategic autonomy. So it's kind of ironic that because China is pushing for this, asking the EU to be independent from the US, not to be vassalized, that's somehow presented as sowing division. That's that's not division. That's the normal state of affairs. Europe should have its own voice, its own independent way of having foreign relations, and so on. So that framing is very dishonest, I think.
Nice Lord of the Rings analogy there. I think that sort of thing really helps ordinary people understand these quite complex political dynamics, I guess. So in your view, what is the state now of Sino-French relations, and where do you hope those relations head into the future?
I would say it's not as good as it should be. I think overall Macron keeps speaking about strategic autonomy, but he often fails to jump on opportunities to apply it in practice. There was an interesting article in the FT yesterday that said that Europe missed an opportunity for a grand bargain with China, where the EU will not join the US in its anti-China crusade and continue to trade normally with China in exchange for China's help in ending the Ukraine war. I largely agree with that. That would have been strategic autonomy, but instead Macron asks a lot of China, but fails to deliver the one thing that China really wants, which is an assurance that Europe isn't on the side of the US against them. I guess he doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want to antagonize the US. And this is classic Macron. He wants to please everyone, but at the end of the day, no one is pleased, really. So, yeah, I think he needs to clearly take a line, stick to it. And as I think she even wrote during his trip, during one of his articles I think it was in the Serbian newspaper or the Hungarian one, not just words, but actions matter.
Yeah, totally. I'll definitely be watching the French-Sino relationship into the future. Arnaud Bertrand, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And now for the Serbian perspective, I want to bring in Nik Stankovic, who has been living in China now for 15 years. Nik, it's great to see you. I'll start with the same question I put to Arnaud. What are your overall thoughts on President Xi's visit to Serbia? Was it a success, and how was it received by the Serbian public?
Oh, it was a resounding success. This was President Xi's second visit to Serbia in 8 years, and 30 new agreements were signed this time, including, for example, educational cooperation under which China will sponsor 300 Serbian students and 50 researchers to come to China. There will be two new routes added from Belgrade, direct flights to China, one to Shanghai and one to Guangzhou. And there was lots of discussions about the free trade agreement, which China and Serbia signed, I believe, about 6 months ago, which President Vučić also mentioned in his speech, giving an example, for example, what it will mean for Serbian farmers, which will have essentially no tariff, 0% customs for their products compared to other countries which have 38 to 62% tariffs. And I'm sure a lot of European farmers would like the same deal.
Nice. Hey, it's been 25 years since NATO bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. And President Xi, he made a point of bringing that up on his visit there this week. The Financial Times seemed to find that inconvenient, to say the least. And they kind of treated it like China was just causing trouble by remembering that hideous incident. I'm curious to know how the Serbian people view that bombing.
Well, you can imagine how the Serbian people view NATO's aggression on our country, and that led to an occupation even to this day of part of our country. So, but China was also a victim during that bombing. 3 people died, 20 people were severely injured. And it wasn't just the Financial Times, actually. It was also the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Department who also brought it up and was apparently not happy that President Xi's visit coincided with this anniversary, which I think is very inappropriate coming from countries that participated in this attack. Because this visit was really not about this event. It was really about trade and cooperation. It was mentioned by President Vučić and President Xi, of course, a couple of times in their speeches. There was no event around the former Chinese embassy. So I think it really was not about that. But I think everybody has a right to honor their victims and commemorate tragic events in their history.
We all saw the images of China's flag all over the streets of Belgrade. And at one point, President Xi was greeted by about 15,000 people, I think, outside the Palace of Serbia. I want to ask, is China really viewed favorably by the average Serbian, or was this kind of just put on for the visit?
Well, of course, this particular event was very well planned and organized for security reasons. You can't have that many people, close to a foreign dignitary without planning and security. But people in Serbia were really excited about the visit. I was in touch with lots of people there, and it was a 2 or 3 day media frenzy in Serbia. It was pretty much it was all over the TV across the political spectrum, and lots of analysis, economic analysis, political analysis about the visit. What does it mean? And so on. A lot of documentaries on TV about China. But something that few people know, there's probably 15,000 to 20,000 Chinese living in Serbia today, and it may not seem like a large number for somebody from the US or UK or France. But Serbia is a relatively small country, 7 million people. So that's a decent. We don't have any other foreign community like that other than the Chinese. So people in Serbia are quite used to seeing Chinese. We also have a disproportionate amount of Chinese tourists because of the visa-free regime. So people in Serbia are really used to seeing Chinese people, and historically, we've always had good relations with China. There's no outstanding issues. And with all this cooperation investment, it is the Serbian views of Chinese people in China are super positive.
Nice. Last question. In your view, what is the state of Sino-Serbian relations today? And where do you hope or see those relations heading into the future?
Well, you're not the first one to ask me that, and I've actually thought about it. It's hard to even imagine the relations between Serbia and China getting even better. And I just want to remind your viewers, for example, some of the things that happened just in the past 10 years. Serbia and China have established a 30-day visa-free regime, bilateral. That was the first European country to do that. And so also direct flights. There's now a free trade agreement. China has invested in Serbia's key industries. These are billions of dollars of investments, financed and built a high-speed train, which is the only one operating in Eastern Europe, officially high-speed rail, and also one of the fastest ones in all of Europe, actually. And also China has helped build countless highways and bridges and tunnels. There's also military technical cooperation, and now there's this educational cooperation. So, where do you go from here? And I would say, I think the only thing left really is for people in Serbia and more Serbians to take advantage of these opportunities in the coming years and decades. And because we've really built a very good platform and a nice runway with China. So I think it's time for Serbia to take off and maybe even join the China space program.
Wow, sounds like the only way is up. Nik, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Now, I asked you guys what you think of Financial Times reportage of President Xi's European visit on the Reports on China YouTube page. More than 3,000 of you voted, and the vast majority, predictably, 98% of you confirmed it's just a case of sour grapes. Kay Renler commented, "It's like the sort of thing someone would say if they did not get invited to the party. I hate you and your party is boring." P. Chan asked, did the Financial Times report on the massive welcome by the Serbian ordinary folks and the scale and grandeur of the French visit? Thanks for the comments, you guys. What do you think? Was President Xi's European visit unproductive or was it fruitful? Let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.